That is, traditionally when they begin talks in the Buddhist tradition, the Theravadan Buddhist tradition, they'll pay homage to the Buddha. And that's basically a way of respecting the sources of our knowledge and our understanding. So, Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Basically that means homage to the Buddha, the awakened one, awakened by his own means. So the talk tonight is about letting go, letting love. And I was thinking about this, and as I mentioned earlier, it's a big topic. There's a lot we could talk about here. And I thought that I would talk a little bit about the hindrances to meditation, what blocks us in our path of progress in meditation and also in life, as well as some factors in life that can serve to help us awaken to the way things are. And I know Julian talked about this probably about a month ago or more. If you're here, you may remember it was called, I think he called it the Bhajanas, yeah? That's what it's called in Pali, isn't it?
Pali, yeah. Yeah, I talked about it in the context of community, so anyway, what I said was being a little bit.
Okay. So, last time I was here, I talked about the Eightfold Path. And there is a famous bhikkhu called Ajahn Sumedho, who's been an American-born Buddhist monk. He's been a monk for about, I don't know, maybe 50 years. I'm not sure now. He's in his 80s. And I was listening to a talk of his once upon a time, and he said the Eightfold Path could be summarised in 2 words. He said, basically, it could be summarised as letting go. And I think that's quite true. I think the Eightfold Path is characterised by letting go of clinging, holding on tightly. And if we think of the causes of suffering, and I've talked about this before, there's some root causes which are greed, ignorance and hatred. Greed is this grasping after, clinging to pleasant experiences. Ignorance is not knowing what's going on, not seeing, not perceiving, not apprehending, not understanding things. And hatred is the opposite of that grasping after. It's the pushing away and aversion to and condemnation of experiences, like this kind of direction. So within that grasping after and that pushing away, pulling away, is what we call craving. And the cause of suffering, according to the Buddha, is one of the root causes, or the root cause, is craving. In Pali it's called tanha, and tanha literally translates as thirst. And in the cycle of dependent origination, or the cycle of how we create suffering and get caught in patterns of suffering, craving leads to grasping, grasping leads to clinging, clinging leads to becoming, becoming leads to birth, aging, sickness, death, and we sort of go in this cycle. So craving is this insistence to get something. It's an insistence of kind of going after something in this way, but it can also be an insistence to move away from something. It's like a drivenness to move away from something. In fact, in the teachings, they talk about 3 types of cravings, 3 types of thirsts. The first type is called, in Pali, it's called bhava tanha. It means craving for life, like the fact that we want to exist. The second type is called cravings for death. In other words, cravings to not exist. It's called vibhava tanha in Pali. but it's this craving to be nothing, to be annihilated. And at its extreme level, it would be the drive for people to want to suicide, for example. But I've also see this sometimes in my partner. We'll come home after a hard day's work and she's getting really tired and it's getting late at night. She says, I just want to turn it off. I want to turn off the day. I want to go to sleep. There's a particular craving to turn it all off, to be non-existent. And the other type of craving is kama tanha, which means craving for sensual experiences, usually sensual pleasures. But here senses mean what contacts our eyes, ears, nose, touch, and taste. So there's the 5 traditional senses. But in Buddhist psychology, we also have the sense called the mind. So whatever we experience through our mind, it's basically craving for experience that we experience through the senses, through the 5 physical senses, and also the senses of our mind, like craving for ideas and concepts and experiences. There's another type of clinging and craving as well. Actually, it's more like clinging in this respect. So we have this craving for experiences, and craving leads to clinging, it leads to grasping and clinging. And so the antidote, obviously, is to let go. Can you see that? If we're clinging onto something, the obvious antidote is to let go. There's something else that causes a lot of suffering, and this is our clinging to views, our clinging to concepts, and our clinging to experience. And you don't have to go far to see the amount of suffering that happens when we cling to views about particular things. And then we struggle with views. People are fighting with views. And there's clinging to concepts. Well, the biggest concept that we have is the concept of ourselves. And when we cling to a particular concept of ourselves and somebody projects a different concept on us, sometimes it's a bit suffering. There's a bit of suffering in that. And of course, clinging to experience. Actually, the clinging to the self, that's a big one. We have this sense of clinging to this idea of who I am, who and what I am. The stronger we hold on to it, the worse it is, if that makes sense. If we can let go of that clinging, we actually realize what we really are, which is this changing dynamic of arising and passing of mental and physical phenomena and spirit and consciousness and mental formations and perceptions and all sorts of things. And there's a continuity in that, but we can be free within that. Is this making sense for you? Is that kind of... Okay. Damn. Let it go, Greg. Okay, so in this process of letting go of these patterns of clinging and grasping and holding on tightly, we practice the Eightfold Path, which is, in essence, letting go of the unhelpful and cultivating the helpful. So we have this balance of letting go and also holding on gently, holding on and nourishing and nurturing something. Not a grasping after, we're not holding it like this, but we're sort of allowing it to be. And in the allowing to be, with our focused attention, we can actually nourish and nurture it. So in the traditions, there are 5 hindrances in this process of waking up. The 5 hindrances are these. Obsessive desire, usually it's called sensual desire, or obsessive sensual desire, and it's that craving again. I want to distinguish between good desire and unhelpful desire. There is good desire, which is what Greg was talking about a little bit before with intentions. Like you had a good desire to come here tonight. I think that's a healthy desire. It leads to something quite fruitful. Then there's unhelpful desire, which we could call as craving, which is grasping after an experience to fill up a hole somehow, like feeling a sense of emptiness here and grasping after something to fill that. So this first hindrance to meditation and also to life is you might be sitting here and you'd be thinking about, fantasizing about what you're going to eat later on, or the next relationship you're going to get into, or your next job, or whatever it is. It's like pulling you out of the present moment. It becomes an obstruction. It's talked about like, actually I'll go back, I'll tell you all the hindrances and I'll give you some analogies to these in a minute. The next hindrance is called ill will, and it refers to this tendency to be divisive, to separate, to push away. It's reflected in that sense of aversion. You know how I was talking about the craving to push away? This is what ill will is. Ill will is divisive. It contracts oneself. You feel kind of separated from others and the world, and you feel really isolated and tight and alone. The next hindrance is called, traditionally it's called sloth and torpor. I think it's better described as a lethargy or mental thickness and dullness. It's just kind of not really seeing clearly. It just kind of manifests as sleepiness sometimes. But, you know, it's not to be confused with when you're sleep deprived and you need to go to sleep. It is when you sort of having a thick mind, a foggy mind. I'll talk more about this in a minute. Then we have the next hindrance is called restlessness, and it's this energetic. It's the opposite of lethargy. With lethargy, your mind's really thick and dull, and also your body's kind of flopping down, almost going to sleep. It feels like that. You've got lethargy. With restlessness, it's the opposite energetic factor, or it's the opposite energetic manifestation. It's like you're really agitated. You can't really sit still. You want to move around all the time, physically. But your mind is sort of going all over the place. It goes from one thing to the next. It's never really settling on anything. It's just going around. And the last hindrance is called paralyzing doubt. Sometimes it's called skeptical doubt. I think being skeptical about something is quite healthy. You know, I like to be skeptical about what a lot of politicians talk about. I think that's healthy skepticism. They're making claims for all sorts of things. I like to be skeptical about that because it means that I need to investigate into it and find out the truth behind it. As a hindrance to meditation and to life, it is manifest like is paralyzing in some respects. It's like being at the fork of a road, and this is the classic analogy, a person at the fork of a road not knowing which way to go, so they don't go anywhere. They're just sort of stuck. They're feeling stuck in chronic procrastination and chronic uncertainty. And it manifests in meditation in the form of sitting down to meditate, and you don't have a lot of confidence in it, or you don't have a confidence in what the person's saying, or you don't have confidence in the meditation, so you don't really kind of apply effort and energy. Nothing happens. And you kind of look around and you see everyone close their eyes, looking really calm. You think, oh, they're fooling themselves. This doesn't work. This is useless. I think I'll go. And you walk out. Or you do something different. You just don't apply yourself. You don't apply yourself. Another way of understanding it is you just don't have confidence. And in life, often we don't have confidence in our own capacity. It can be related to not only meditation, but life activities. We don't have confidence in something, so we don't put forth the effort to meet our dreams or fulfill our aspirations. We just sort of get stuck. These are hindrances in meditation. And the biggest let go that you can do is to be aware of these qualities and let them go. And there's specific strategies for every one of them. Mindfulness, however, is probably the best overall general strategy for dealing with this. So the 7 factors of awakening, which are this other, it's sort of diametrically opposite to the 5 hindrances. And sometimes they're described like that in the teachings, in the suttas. They're particular factors that, when come together, they help you wake up. They're factors that you can cultivate and nourish and nurture in order for you to wake up, in order for you to see what's going on and be free. So these factors are mindfulness, investigation, energy or effort, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. The first 3 factors, mindfulness, investigation, and effort, are very much in line with what we do with insight meditation. I don't know if anybody can remember. I think I've talked about this a little bit. I can't remember when. But it's on the net now anyway. So, insight meditation is about inquiry, focusing on mindfulness, emphasizing mindfulness, I should say. Also including concentration, but emphasizing mindfulness and inquiry, so you're investigating into something and you're seeing the nature of it. Serenity meditation is emphasizing concentration, and it works towards producing calm and tranquility. So the first 3 factors, mindfulness, investigation, and effort, are very much related to insight meditation. The next 3 factors, joy, tranquility, and concentration, are very much related to serenity meditation. And equanimity is both serenity and insight, to be honest. You can get to equanimity, which is this sense of a balanced mind, a mind that's unshaken by the ups and downs of life, a mind that's very stable. You can get to that through insight meditation and or serenity meditation. So, how these work with the hindrances, very interesting. Mindfulness works with all of them. If you can be aware of a hindrance, if you can acknowledge it and even name it, like when you're sitting and you might be sitting and it's you're going like this. You're getting caught up in mental thickness and dullness, for example. If you can name it, it helps. You can name it. You bring awareness to it. It sort of lightens it up a bit. Similarly with the other hindrances, like if you can just note, for example, I'm experiencing, when you're sitting there fantasizing about the next relationship or whatever you're going to be, what you're going to be doing on your holiday and so on when you're meditating, if you can just note it and be aware, this is obsessive desire, this is obsessive craving, this is that first hindrance, this is what it is. If you can name it, it breaks down the power of it pulling you in and sucking you in and deceiving you. So mindfulness is useful for all of them. The specific strategy for craving, that first hindrance, obsessive desire, is to actually see a balanced perspective on what's happening. In other words, see what's attractive about it, which is what you're being blinded to, what's attractive about the various thing you're going after and obsessing about, but also seeing what's unattractive about it, seeing the big picture, inquiring into it and seeing the reality of it, seeing both sides of the picture. There's analogies for these hindrances, by the way. They're sometimes compared to, meditation is compared to looking at your face in a reflection, in the reflection of a bowl of water, if that's what meditation is. Each of the hindrances have an analogy. The first hindrance, obsessive desire, is like looking at your reflection in a bowl of water, but the water is coloured with dye. So what you're seeing is not a true reflection, what you're seeing is the dye. And you know how we talk about how love is blind sometimes? Remember when you're young and fell in love with someone and they were just the bee's knees and you thought you'd be in love with them forever, and you couldn't see anything unattractive about them. All you could see what was really lovely and attractive about them. But in your older wisdom, you've grown up and you're separated from them, and you're looking back and you're saying, oh yeah, that was good about them, but they also had something that wasn't so attractive. That's the way that's the way you work with that obsessive desire. Does that make sense? Okay, so the next hindrance, ill will, it's compared to a bowl of water that's boiling. So there's no reflection there, the water's boiling. The antidote for that is mindfulness, of course, but as well as loving kindness, the cultivation of goodwill towards oneself and others, to sort of change your perspective on something, being open to something, seeing the good in whatever's happening. The next hindrance is sloth and torpor, or mental thickness and dullness. And this is where we bring in the factors of awakening. Probably mindfulness is really useful for all of them. So that's the first factor on the 7 factors of awakening. The second factor is investigation, which is inquiry into something. So if you're got caught up in mental thickness and dullness, the thing to do is not necessarily to calm down, but to rouse yourself. To rouse yourself with inquiry and investigation. You're looking into it. Oh, what's going on here? Isn't this interesting? I'm feeling my head's bouncing forward. I'm falling to the ground. Isn't this interesting? You develop a lot of inquiry. So that's one way that one of the factors of awakening can rouse you. You also cultivate energy, which is the third factor on the 7 factors of awakening. You're kind of rousing yourself. You're stimulating yourself. You might even open your eyes and look around, look at some lights, turn the light on, and stand up rather than lying down, and so on and so forth. The fourth factor, the fourth hindrance, being agitation or restlessness. The way you work with that is mindfulness, of course, but also to be able to utilize those 3 factors of awakening that are related to serenity meditation. Joy, tranquility, and concentration. Being able to focus your attention, being able to calm your mind down. So this, in the analogy, this hindrance is similar to looking at a bowl of water that is cut by wind, where there's a bit of agitation on the surface of the water, so you can't really see clearly. And the way to work with that is to be mindful of it, but also calm your mind, utilising joy, tranquility, and concentration, like really focusing on it and letting your mind settle down. And the last hindrance, there's a couple of different analogies to this. One analogy that the sloth and torpor there, by the way, the analogy is like algae across the bowl, so you can't really see clearly. The last analogy, the last hindrance, is this. Is for paralysing doubt. The way it's sometimes described is by looking at the bowl as if it's like mud rather than water. So it's kind of thick and murky. But another analogy is the bowl is being put into the dark, so you can't really see it clearly anyway. You're in the dark. So what we do with that one, again, is to use one of those factors of awakening called investigation, which is inquiring into it, to bring it into the light. To bring it into the light, to make things clear, to reflect on things, to say, oh, hold on a minute, yeah, this is really good. I'm capable of doing this, if you want to build your confidence. To be honest with yourself, to inquire into it and reflect on it. So this is a lot about effort, and simply put, sometimes when you're doing meditation, it's a matter of calming yourself when you're agitated, when you're feeling these agitation, restlessness factors, and rousing yourself when you're feeling kind of overwhelmed with thickness and dullness, if that makes sense. Okay, I think that's about it. I'm sorry I didn't leave much time for discussion, but we still got about 10 minutes. Yeah?
On my
Huh? 10:20. Okay, so I think I'll bring the talk to a close now anyway, and we can have some discussion about this and other things. I hope it's been helpful. And please forgive me if I've misrepresented anything or I explained something incorrectly. Thank you.